So that was CAF boss Patrice Motsepe there. Ben, your thought, you were in Cameroon. You've been to the Olembe.
Yep.
You were at the Olembe. Just give us an idea of the ground vis-a-vis the episode that happened there, so that we can get a bit of context.
Well, the Olembe Stadium, I think I was a little shocked by the Stampede, but I wasn't too shocked. I'll tell you why. It's a stadium that's built basically on the outskirts of Yaoundé, and so they had room to build it as big as they wanted. They had room to build entrances as big as they wanted, but there's been a very sharp upsurge in fan intake into the grounds. Now, after the first, I think, 2 games or so, their Prime Minister issued an order to have school children close at noon and workers close at 1 p.m. because attendances were not impressive. And when you speak to a lot of Cameroonians, you get the sense that the Olembe represents some sort of historic or sort of touristy type ground where, because it's new and most people haven't been to, they need to actually get a chance to observe and have a feel of. And so it's an interesting place. Now, when I was going the first time, I must say that I was telling one of my Ugandan friends that, look, if there's ever a full house here, there will be trouble at this ground, because we had to struggle through a crowd. Now, you need to walk through a walkway that's about like 100 yards or maybe 150 yards before you get to the first batch of gates. Now, what's problematic for me is that even as a media person, right, my accreditation got me through quicker than most, but I basically had to fight through a crowd, had to part the Red Sea and stuff like that to be able to get to where I needed to get to. Now, when you get to the gate itself, what I think should be happening is that they need to check your health status, PCR test, vaccination card, and then you go through the first gate to the second gate. But what happens is they let you in if you have a ticket before you actually start doing your medical test. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because if you test positive, which is supposed to be at the first gate, you have no business going through to the second gate in the first place. So what happened here was that they went through the first gate, which was the ticket gate, went through the second gate, which was the next gate, and then the next point is a security check. But the truth is, there are about, if I'm not mistaken, there are about 5 or 6 gates. That's excluding the VIP gates and the media gates, and only 3 of them were actually functioning. Only 3. Now, what happens also is that you are supposed to admit 80% when Cameroon is playing matches. And so 80%, I believe, is a 60,000 capacity. 80% will come down to somewhere around 47, 48,000 members or fans in the stands. What happened was that they engaged in crowd control and stuff like that. There are a lot of them who are basically just parked on the streets, just watching the crowds, some trying to prevent you from getting beyond a certain limit. So what happens is they cordon off roads 2 hours to games. Roads and all adjoining roads. So there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of chaos, and there are a lot of people who get down from their cars and basically walk. So already you have a crowd walking down this 150-yard walkway that I'm talking about. So they all basically come and converge at one point where you have, say, 5,000 people trying to get through the gates, manned by maybe 10 police people or 10 other LOC members from the CAF organizing committee. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me, Nathan, because like I'm telling you, even with my media press pass, I had to push people aside, so I could do this. It wasn't a very smooth process. It wasn't very comfortable. And so when I heard that a stampede had happened, I was telling Clive that, look, I told you this will happen. Because this ground is a ground where most Cameroonians actually want to come to and want to come and watch their football. But you are not opening all the gates. And if you listen to Motsepe, he did say that he didn't want to apportion blame before the report comes out today. But he already apportioned blame, because if you watch the full presser, he did say that why were those other gates closed? And that, yes, it is true that the stadium had reached its agreed capacity. But if those gates were open, there would have been no essence, or there would have been no need for fans to actually rush through. But again, you can't also blame all of this on organizers. There's a lot of misbehavior at the gates. And again, that's because it's a free gate. After a certain point, guys are trying to get in free. So there's a lot of pushing. Guys didn't understand security telling them that we've reached our 80% capacity and so you cannot come in. People were climbing over the gates. People were trying to break the joints of the gates. just so they could go get a glimpse of Cameroon. And I don't blame them, because if you watch how Cameroon has been playing, it could have been their last game at the tournament. And so all of them, like I'm saying, view it as, oh, it's historic, it's the Olembe, we've never been there. Cameroon is hosting this tournament, they're playing this game here. We all need to go have a look. But the security personnel, very, very, like, heavily inadequate. They are overwhelmed. If you look at the crowd numbers that are coming and the security that are actually deployed to be able to take out the gates, they are overwhelmed. And that's a problem for me, because a lot of their colleagues are basically sitting in the buckets of pickup trucks, just staring into thin air. Others are posted around doing nothing. And so they need to check that out. Again, even aside the gate issue, getting out of the Olembe Stadium after a game is another trouble altogether.
Wow.
You need to basically spend close to 2 hours. If you're in a car, you are going to spend between an hour and 2 hours just getting out of the stadium to basically where traffic is moderate, not even to your destination. So for most people, I realized after the first game, I had to get an Okada out of there, because there was no way I was going to sit in traffic for 2 hours. So I had to get an Okada out of there. And then after I got to the main road from where the stadium ends, we got a taxi and then to our hotel. So the stadium is flashy, the stadium is nice, but there are just a lot of logistical flaws with the stadium, and especially with personnel deployment for the competition. They have a lot of volunteers, they have a lot of policemen around. I think they should be utilizing these people a lot more, instead of just letting them look in the air and distribute food and stuff like that.
Okay. How long is the travel distance from like the city center to the stadium?
That's a good one. So from where I was, which was the Mansell Hotel, that area is called Omnisport. So that's from Omnisport to Olembe is about 35 minutes. And even that was
35 minutes.
35 minutes. And even that was us dodging traffic. We went through a shorter route, because like I'm telling you, 2 hours to games, they block the roads and all the adjoining routes that lead to the stadium. So you either need to use some Appian way somewhere to find your way to the stadium, or you need to get to a point and basically walk like 20 minutes to the ground.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking is that it's, because you mentioned the stadium was out of time, I'm wondering how all of these people got there. It's possible some of them even walked.
That's what I'm saying. So most people, if you are in a taxi or you're coming by public transportation, you need to stop at least 20 minutes away from the ground and walk to the ground. And so like I'm saying, most people had converged at a point and were walking down to the ground in crowds.
Yeah.
So,
here's the other question. Are there, like around the stadium, is there public viewing centers there? LED screens?
Nope.
And that's just one logistical failure that we make at a lot of these events. I personally, like, if I'm planning any big events, even around the stadium, there has to be a lot of screens and a lot of viewing centers around the stadium. Those things will prevent the people from trying to get into the stadium. But the moment they get there and they can't see anything else unless they're inside the stadium, there's trouble. Because usually, people just want to watch the game around the stadium because they want to join the party after the game is done. It's not necessarily because... But if they come there, there are no screens, nothing, and the only way you see the game is if you're inside the stadium, they will try and get in there.
And just to add to what Fence is saying, look, in all the games I've observed games at the Amadou Ahidjo, Olembe, and then the Garoua Stadium. There's not been a single instance where there's been an orderly queue where guys are handing over their tickets, you move on. It's always a huddle and always a crowd. And that's shocking because we're in the COVID era. And the truth is, Cameroonians only respect COVID at their borders, which is the airport. When you get into taxis, when you get into town,
if you're wearing a mask, you're the strange one.
The culture of mask wearing is basically non-existent. So I picked the taxi once, and I got down from the taxi, and I told the driver that, you know what, this has been one of the best taxi rides I've had. Your car is comfortable and everything, but do me a favor.
Wear your mask.
Wear your mask and protect your customers. He says there's no COVID in Cameroon. And I'm like, I was asked to do a test at your airport. He says, yes, that is the airport. This is the streets. So this is the sort of mentality that they have. So there's basically no social distancing. There are no queues. There's no order in terms of trying to check. And even with the checking of PCR tests and vaccine cards and whatnot, look, I'm telling you that there are a lot of instances. The Ghanaian contingent were bent on basically getting us to do our COVID test before every game. There are journalist friends of mine who got into games after having done just their first COVID test because they don't check when you get to the stadium. And when they ask you for it, they don't take a good look to look at the details.
God.
All they know is that you've whipped out the document and you've shown it to them. Whether it's a negative or positive, they're not really sure about it. They just let you.
So as we wrap it up on this, Ben, who would you blame? In terms of
blame, how do we prevent this from happening?
First of all, because somebody has to be held responsible.
Yep.
And then we can get to the prevention just quickly before we move on.
I just think the LOC have to take responsibility because this is their competition, and they've looked the part a lot. They've just not been as rigorous in following through with the actual actions. And like I'm saying, they have a ton of volunteers assisting at the competition. They have a ton of security men around stadia, around the competition. If you have the presence of mind to say that you are blocking roads and adjoining routes to the stadium 2 hours before games, you should have the presence of mind to be able to allow fans of the game to go watch games in an orderly manner, especially when you know that you've opened free gates and that it's going to get a little chaotic because the host nation is on. And if you have a feel of the kind of euphoria Cameroonians go through when their national team is playing, I mean, it goes without saying that you should be able to put these measures in place. Have fans go into the stadia in an orderly manner. It's very important.
Okay, so an inside view of the happenings in Cameroon. Benjamin was there, so he's bringing us greater context and better clarity in terms of the Olembe Stadium and how and why a stampede was probably going to happen. We'll see what CAF will do. What CAF has done initially is to move the game from the Olembe, which is Sunday's quarterfinal, to the Ahmadu Ahidjo. And then we wait to see whether or not the Olembe will host a few more games before the competition comes to an end.